C misdemeanor site.
10-4, 12.
Can you 911 outside?
1035, Mary.
911, what's your emergency?
925 out.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of my series, Crafts and Crimes. Every week I post a new video of myself crafting while talking about a different true crime. This week I'll be talking about the case of spree killer Charles Starkweather and his girlfriend Caril Ann Fugate. Charles Raymond Starkweather was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on November 24, 1938. He was the third of 7 children, born to parents Guy and Helen Starkweather. His father was a carpenter who was frequently unemployed due to rheumatoid arthritis in his hands, and his mother worked as a waitress to supplement the family's income. Charles was born with a mild birth defect that caused his legs to be bowed. He also had a speech impediment. Charles was bullied all throughout elementary, middle, and high school because of his bow-legged walk and speech impediment. As Charles got older and stronger, the only subject he excelled at in school was gym. He used this as an outlet for his rage. He began to bully those who had bullied him. As a young teenager, Charles Starkweather went from being one of the most well-behaved teenagers in the community to one of the most troubled. A friend of Charles said, quote, "He could be the kindest person you've ever seen. He'd do anything for you if he liked you. He was a hell of a lot of fun to be around. Everything was just one big joke to him. But he had this other side. He could be mean as hell, cruel. If he saw some poor guy on the street who was bigger than he was, better looking, or better dressed, he'd try to take the poor bastard down to his size." Charles left school in his senior year and began working as a lorry loader for a local newspaper company. Around the same time, Starkweather began emulating James Dean's character from the 1955 film Rebel Without a Cause. He saw the character as a kindred spirit who had been through the same trauma as him. Charles had begun to develop a severe inferiority complex. He became self-loathing and devoid of morals, believing that he could do nothing right. In 1956, Charles Starkweather was introduced to 13-year-old Caril Ann Fugate. Caril Ann Fugate was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on July 30, 1943. She was the second child born to parents, William and Velda Fugate. She was introduced to Charles Starkweather by her older sister Barbara, who was dating his friend Bob Von Bush. Charles committed his first murder in the early morning hours on December 1, 1957. Robert Calvert, a service station worker, refused to sell Starkweather a stuffed animal he wanted to give Caril on credit. This enraged Charles, but he left, only to return 3 more times. The final time he stole $100 and forced Calvert into the backseat of his car. Charles drove Robert out to a remote area of Lincoln and forced him back out of the car. There was a struggle for the shotgun, which resulted in Calvert being shot in the kneecap. Charles then shot the wounded Robert in the face. He immediately went to Caril Ann to confess to the robbery, but he denied killing Robert Calvert. She didn't believe him. On January 21, 1958, Charles went to visit Caril Ann, but she wasn't home. Fugate's mother and stepfather, Velda and Marion Bartlett, told him to stay away from their daughter. Following an altercation, Charles shot Caril's parents and proceeded to strangle, then fatally stabbed her 2-year-old half-sister Betty Jean. When Caril Ann returned home, she allegedly helped Charles hide the bodies, and the couple lived together in the house for 6 days. There was a note taped to the front door that said, quote, "Stay away, everybody is sick with the flu," then signed with her mother's name. Family members became suspicious when Caril kept sending them away. On January 27, Caril Ann's grandmother called the police to check on the family, but by the time the police arrived, the couple had already fled. Starkweather and Fugate drove to Bennett, Nebraska, to the farm of a family friend, August Meyer. Charles killed him with a shotgun blast to the head. While fleeing the area, the couple's car became stuck in the mud, forcing them to hitchhike. They were picked up by couple Robert Jensen and Caril King, 2 local teenagers. Jensen and King were forced to drive the couple back to an abandoned storm shelter in Bennett, where their lives were ended. Starkweather admitted to killing Jensen but claimed that it was Fugate who killed King. After stealing Robert Jensen's car, the couple fled Bennett. They drove to a wealthy section of Lincoln, where they entered the home of C. Lauer and Carol Ward. Starkweather admitted to throwing a knife at Mrs. Ward but claimed that Fugate killed Kara and the maid, Lillian Fency. When Mr. Ward arrived home, Charles shot him. The couple then stole Ward's 1956 Packard and filled it with stolen jewelry from the house, then fled Nebraska. Charles and Caril Ann realized the car they were in was too high profile and they needed a new one. They found a traveling salesman named Merle Collison sleeping in his Buick outside of Douglas, Wyoming. Starkweather claims that when his shotgun jammed, it was Fugate who shot Collison. He said, quote, "She is the most trigger-happy person." When the couple couldn't get the car started after it stalled, a Good Samaritan stopped to help, but Starkweather threatened him with a shotgun, which led to an altercation. A deputy sheriff arrived not long after the altercation began. Caril Ann ran up to the officer, claiming that Charles was trying to kill her and that she had been abducted. Starkweather fled and attempted to evade police by driving at speeds over 100 miles per hour. The back window was shot out by Sheriff Earl Heflin, and Starkweather was cut, which caused him to stop the car abruptly. The sheriff said of Starkweather, quote, "He thought he was bleeding to death. That's why he stopped. That's the kind of yellow son of a bitch he is." At first, Charles Starkweather claimed that Caril Ann Fugate was his hostage and had nothing to do with any of the murders, but he later changed his story and even testified against her. Despite committing 11 murders, Charles Starkweather was only tried and convicted for the murder of Robert Jensen and sentenced to death on May 23, 1958. Charles Starkweather was executed in the electric chair at Nebraska State Penitentiary on June 25, 1959. He had no official final words but wrote in a letter to his parents, quote, "But Dad, I'm not real sorry for what I did, 'cause for the first time me and Carol had more fun." Caril Ann always maintained that she was Starkweather's hostage and that he had threatened to kill her family. She claimed that she had no idea they were already dead. Judge Harry Spencer did not believe Fugate and determined that she had numerous opportunities to escape. Fugate was convicted as an accomplice and sentenced to life in prison on November 21, 1958. She was the youngest woman in the history of the United States to be convicted of first-degree murder. In 1973, the Nebraska Board of Pardons commuted Fugate's sentence from life in prison to 30 to 50 years, and 3 years later in 1976, she was released from prison for being a model prisoner. Caril Ann Fugate made an application to the Nebraska Board of Pardons to have her name cleared, as she has always maintained she was innocent of all charges. However, her application was denied in February 2020. Random fact: the film Natural Born Killers is based on this case. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Crafts and Crimes. If you're interested in the things I'm crafting, please check out my Etsy shop. Link is in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and comment below with what future cases you want me to talk about. Don't forget to subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on any future uploads. I'll see you all next time.